Okay, well, we're going to just let people trickle in as they will, and as we know with Austin traffic in this day and age, we never know when exactly we're going to get here. But this is a series of talks that we're just putting together just for the general community about health and wellness. Tonight specifically is about exercise. How to get a lean, fit body in 30 minutes or less. And I think one of the messages I really want to convey tonight is that sometimes we think that exercise is something that if we don't have a lot of time to commit to it, we're not going to get what we need and want, and that nothing could be further from the truth. So we really want to focus on that tonight. Last month we did a lecture on weight loss breakthroughs 2018. If you haven't seen that, all of these lectures will be loaded on the ruthieharper.com website, as well as the official website, as well as Lamar Plaza Pharmacy website, and those are the three groups that are really sponsoring these. And so we're grateful to the people that are putting this together and allowing us to do this community education. But that is really about kind of the breakthroughs and what you want to know in terms of body composition, in terms of fueling, and kind of laying some foundational pieces. Last year I talked a lot about hormones, so female hormones, some male hormones, thyroid hormone, but all of that is super important too. But tonight we really again want to focus on exercise and what you need to know with regards to moving your body. So 30 minutes to a fit, lean body. So I always like to just kind of lay some foundationals, and it's interesting to me because when I talk to people about exercise, we're always thinking that it's what we're doing while we're moving that is important in terms of the gains of exercise. And so one of the things that I try to teach people is that it's not what you're doing during exercise, but what happens after exercise that's so important. And so, this whole concept that you can over-exercise is really true. And indeed, we don't want to over-exercise. What we really want to do in the end is over-recover. And so we want to talk tonight a lot about this recovery process and why that's so important. So in order to get your best results with exercise, the things that you really want to focus on is maximizing the stimulus. So you want maximal intensity, you want to really message to your body, I'm doing something important right now. And then you want to maximize the recovery process. Again, that's where you're actually getting the benefits of exercise. And so, again, we want to talk about, well, what do you need to do to accomplish these optimal periods of rest that happen after the exercise session to really get the best results. I want to talk a little bit about weight training. I want to talk about high intensity interval training, which are these two forms of exercise that I find to be the most important, especially as people get older, and how you can use these things to really get what you want, and how each of those really have unique benefits. And so what are the benefits of each of those types of exercise? So first, weightlifting, and again, efficient exercises here tonight. After we finish, we're going to jump into the gym and actually look at some of these machines and how they're able to actually stimulate maximum muscle development. But the concept behind weightlifting is obviously to stimulate the muscles, and we want to have maximal muscle size and function because essentially that's involved with our lean body mass, which relates to our metabolism, the amount of calories that we burn just at rest on a daily basis, which we call our metabolic rate. And so the more lean body mass we have, the more our metabolic rate, the more we're going to actually burn calories just at rest on a daily basis. Obviously that becomes more and more important as we get older, so that we can not have to eat less and less because we have a lower metabolic rate to actually maintain our body composition. Weightlifting is critical for strength, and I see that this is super important as we age. We want to live in a body that's strong, that we're able to move around, get around. We don't want to be slow and debilitated and weak, obviously. Maintaining a sexy shape. I mean, I always think about this too. I mean, we want to look good inside our skin, right? And I hear a lot of people, especially women, because we have less hormones, that maintain muscle mass potentially as we age. But they'll say, you know, my weight is the same, but I don't look the same inside of my body. And so, you know, when you see a person, a woman with a nice, shapely body composition, part of that is the muscle development and the shape that actually is being formed by their lean body mass. And so I think that's an important thing. And then in women also, but I see some of this in men now, bone mass and bone density. So when you're lifting weights, you're actually stimulating bone density. This is really important for osteopenia, osteoporosis. Some bone loss is going to be an inevitable part of every woman's process as she goes through menopause. But again, I actually see bone density issues in men now too. So it's something that we want to be thinking about in terms of lifting weights and how it stimulates bone density. And then this is an incredibly important thing. So it's not only the stimulus and recovery piece that's going to be so important with exercise, but we have to have the right recovery picture, and part of that picture is having the right hormones, and those hormones are stimulated to some extent by the actual exercise process. So when we're weightlifting, weightlifting with maximum stimulus, maximum recovery, we're actually getting these anabolic hormones. And those are specifically growth hormone, which is about healing and repairing the body. It's also about testosterone. It's kind of fun if you actually look at people kind of pre and post workout session when they're weightlifting, you actually can see a shift and a change in those hormones that happens as a result of the weightlifting stimulus. So with weightlifting, again, maximum stimulus, maximum recovery. We always want to follow these intensity rules, and I want to talk about how important intensity actually is. If you lift too often, and this is going to be especially important if you don't have the ideal recovery picture, what's happening is that while you're in this reparative process, you begin to overstimulate and break down the muscle again, and you can actually slow down and decrease the benefits that you've gotten from that previous workout session. So to optimize recovery, the big things that are going to be important are stress, sleep, food. I didn't put hydration up here, but the more those things are not perfect, the more you need to be cautious and careful about basically over-exercising, because again, recovery is where all the benefits actually happen. So efficient exercise, what do I love about it? And I think most of you know, but efficient exercise is actually the name of the company that has put together a weightlifting exercise program that's all about efficiently exercising. And I love it because the whole conceptual is to somewhat increase the intensity of the exercise session. So you've got this, you're maximizing the time of the muscle under tension, which actually basically increases the intensity and therefore allows a shorter duration of exercise with better results or benefits. So it's going to take you to maximum muscle use and utilization and fatigue, and this concept that when I leave the gym, I want to leave nothing in the tank. I want it to be completely empty. I want to have maximal stimulus. But what efficient exercises actually allows me and other people to do that in the minimum amount of time, and basically it's a 30-minute workout session. So it's very straight and to the point. Just like all of us, we have busy schedules, so when you actually have a session that you're setting up with somebody, you have structure, you have accountability, you're going to show up because somebody's there waiting for you to show up. You get maximum benefits in the minimum amount of time. I've kind of spoken to that. Again, in order to get this maximum stimulus, you leave with nothing in the tank. You want to be completely depleted, and indeed you really do feel like that after a 30-minute session. And then I just find too, when you're really when you're exercising at that degree of intensity, especially as you take a muscle through a full range of motion, and those of you who exercise regularly know this, you don't have the same degree of strength or really even flexibility or ability to control that weight through a full range of motion. So when you have somebody there either protecting you and spotting you, or indeed when you're on these machines, you're going to have a greater likelihood of being able to get that maximum intensity with a minimum amount of injury. And injury is super important because every time you get injured, it slows you down, obviously. I don't know how many years I've exercised, efficient exercise, 6 years, 7 years. I haven't ever had an injury. I've never been not able to exercise because of it. So that's a super important thing too. So the next area is what I call high intensity interval training. You know, you can call it a lot of different things. We used to call it the HGH producer. We call it, you know, fast and lean now at the practice. But basically, this is that concept of doing intervals and rest. The goal is to get into an anaerobic state with exercise where you're actually breathless. The anaerobic state is indeed incredibly important for the hormonal stimulation. And once again, it's really this hormonal stimulation that we're trying to get at that gives you the real benefit of exercise. So we're trying to stimulate these hormones of youth again, growth hormone. And I think probably most of you know about growth hormone, but it's, again, a healing reparative hormone. It's part of youthfulness. It's part of anti-aging. A lot of people are trying to get at it in various ways, and one of the ways that you can definitely get at it is through the right forms of exercise. But we want to get growth hormone because of how it repairs our body and keeps us young, and then also testosterone, which is this other anabolic hormone. The thing about high intensity interval training, and I suppose to some extent you can get this through weightlifting also, but I find that high intensity interval training and this type of exercise is really good for our brain in terms of the neurochemical pieces. And when you hear people, I mean, I have people in my practice that are, you know, basically addicted to exercise. I mean, if you're going to be addicted to something, that's a good thing to be addicted to. But they're addicted to it from the standpoint of the brain neurochemistry that's actually happening. So they're getting serotonin, which is a calming neurochemical. They're getting dopamine, which helps them with drive and focus. So we see different neurochemical benefits of exercise too, and those can be important pieces. But high intensity interval training, it actually will strengthen and benefit the heart better than any other form of exercise. And this is true, it's much better than aerobic exercise, which is what we used to think about in terms of cardiovascular conditioning. There's a great book called Body by Science. It's by a physician. And if you want to look at the science behind aerobic versus anaerobic exercise, this would be a great book to read because it'll actually go through how this high intensity interval training will benefit you in terms of heart health and how indeed aerobic exercise is really out of vogue at this point, and how we when we're doing aerobic exercise we can actually decondition our heart instead of conditioning it. So high intensity interval training basically helps you to maintain your weight through the hormonal changes. And so this is the conceptual where you can go in and you can do an aerobic exercise session. You can burn, you know, 200 calories by exercising for an hour. You can say, well, great, you know, this is kind of this, you know, less food, more exercise concept of weight maintenance, which, by the way, never works. That was the last lecture. But when you actually get this hormonal stimulation through high-intensity interval training, you'll get a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week, 365-day metabolism shift and change that allows you to burn calories all the time instead of just during that limited exercise session. And that's why it's so incredibly valuable. Reduces wrinkles and keeps the skin young. I mean, again, you know, as we age, you know, who doesn't want to, again, look good inside of their skin? And it's incredibly important to increase your energy levels. And again, you know, all of us want more energy. That's an important part of, you know, basically daily life. So high intensity interval training, what are you doing here? So this is warming up your body for a few minutes. This can be done on a bicycle, it can be done by running up a hill, it can be on a treadmill, it can be on an elliptical, it can be on a spinner bike, it can be any form of exercise. But basically you're going to warm up Then you're going to move your body as quickly and intensely as you can for a period of 30 to 60 seconds, and you're trying to, it's a maximum output. So you're going to literally try to get as close to breathless as you possibly can. Then you're going to rest for 2 to 3 minutes. So it could be a slow swim, it could be a slow spin, it could be a slow elliptical, it could be walking after you've run up that hill. And basically, you're going to repeat those intervals with maximum stimulus, maximum exercise, followed by rest, back and forth again, for basically the number of cycles or intervals. Typically, it takes about 7 to 10 until you're going to hit this heart rate of 220 minus age with about 5 to 10 heartbeats less than that. And again, this is a very different conceptual than aerobic exercise, where we're trying to get into this, quote, fat burning zone, because here we're trying to get into this anaerobic zone. And so, you know, people, regardless of their age, when they say, oh yeah, I hit a heart rate of 160, 170, you know, and sometimes I'll even say too, my doctor said that was too high. I mean, provided that they're healthy and their heart is in good shape, it's actually beneficial for them to hit that kind of a heart rate and get into the anaerobic zone. So 7 to 10 intervals. If you're fairly unconditioned, non-conditioned, not in great shape, it may happen very quickly because your heart, your body is not used to that degree of intensity. But indeed, as you do it for longer, it'll be harder and harder for you to actually hit that high heart rate just because you're in better condition. But that's exactly what you want to accomplish. So again, you're sprinting, resting, with whatever form of exercise you actually want to do there. So your goal is to hit this anaerobic heart rate. The best way that I can describe that too, like if I'm cycling, when I hit an anaerobic heart rate, I am breathless. I'm almost, you know, gasping for air. And even if I stop and I go into that rest, lowering my intensity phase for a couple of minutes, I still feel breathless for maybe, you know, 20 or 30 seconds after I actually slow down again, because that anaerobic piece has actually occurred. You should be breathless. You should feel like you can go no further, and you're going to repeat that until you hit that target heart rate that I mentioned. And again, same conceptual. When you get done with this, and it'll take about 20 or 30 minutes, you want to leave nothing in the tank. You want maximum stimulus here. So, what does it actually take? And there's a lot of good science out there that says if you could actually just do one weightlifting session and one high-intensity interval training session per week, but do them in the way that I just described, it could be incredibly beneficial for body composition and overall health. And so this is that piece where, you know, sometimes I think we have to get to the gym 5 or 6 days a week, and, you know, we want to make sure that we commit to it and build it into our lives. And that's great if we can do it. But I think that sometimes in our pursuit of perfectionism and getting it all included, we miss out on these real opportunities to do some meaningful work. And so again, 1 time a week of each of those would be great. If you have all the time in the world and you're in a state where you have the ability for maximum recovery, so low stress, optimal sleep, you're eating right, then you could move to the perfect plan, is what I call it, where you're actually lifting twice a week. So you have, you know, a day of lifting, 3 or 4 days in between a day of lifting, and then you're doing your high intensity interval training in between those sessions. And I still like 1 day a week where you're just basically doing nothing and giving your body a chance to basically heal and repair. So this is kind of the range that you can accomplish, you know, and get good results. You don't need tons of time. 20 or 30 minutes. So efficient exercise, the whole session is 30 minutes. High intensity interval training, you will hit that heart rate in these 7 to 10 high intensity maximal output intervals. It just doesn't take that long. So again, exercise is the stimulus. Recovery is the key. When you are not exercising, this is when all the healing, reparative growth of the muscles actually happens. All of the work, the hormonal work and recovery is actually occurring. If you exercise too soon after you have repaired, you actually take away from what you've done as opposed to adding to it. So ways not to succeed: over-exercising, under-recovering. So again, if you've got a lot of stress going on, you're sleepless, you're traveling, you're dieting, you know, the older we get, the more of these type of things are actually going on. If you're not well hydrated, you should not be over-exercising. The other thing, you know, sometimes I see people either go to the gym, they do light weightlifting, they go every other day, they go out, they jog, they walk. I mean, all those things are great. It's good to move our body, but we're talking about tonight, what are the critical ways that you actually need to move and stimulate your body for maximum and optimal health. Most people don't actually exercise hard enough, and they probably exercise too frequently, and that's just not the right combination. More is not better. The right amount is really the key to success. So a couple of comments on length or duration of exercise. Most of you have heard about cortisol, which is the stress hormone. It's interesting because the longer the exercise session, the higher the production. And cortisol, when we're young and fairly unstressed, is not a big deal. But again, as we get older and we have more stress, cortisol is actually a catabolic hormone as opposed to an anabolic hormone. And essentially what that means is that it's breaking down our body instead of healing and repairing our body. So the shorter the exercise session, the lower the cortisol production. The lower the cortisol production, the more anabolic as opposed to catabolic you are, and the greater the results that you're going to get. So the duration is equally important to the intensity. Again, this whole concept of, you know, working out with aerobic exercise, and that's all about caloric burn. That's what happens when you're doing aerobic exercise. You're really actually not getting the heart benefits that it was originally proposed or purported to accomplish, and all you get is the caloric burn during the actual exercise session. You're not actually maximizing output, so you don't have a maximal stimulus. And you know, again, for anybody that's looking at weight loss, this whole concept of if I want to lose weight, I need to eat less and exercise more has been proven again and again to be wrong scientifically. I'm a physician, I'm an MD. It's frustrating when I hear this continually being preached to patients with the belief that if they have weight issues, it's because they're eating too much and not exercising enough, because that'll just actually never get them across the finish line in terms of their weight goals. And again, indeed, you know, aerobic exercise doesn't even strengthen your heart. In fact, it may actually do the opposite. So this anaerobic form of exercise is actually the form that's going to be heart protective. So high intensity interval training changes your growth hormone levels. That's what creates the caloric burn 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It actually does strengthen the cardiovascular system. It allows your heart to be ready for a stressor so that it actually knows what to do if you're in a situation where, for whatever reason, your heart has to undergo that stress response. It improves muscle tone, decreases wrinkles, improves energy, and reduces aging. I mean, obviously all things that we would all like to accomplish. The aerobic exercise science is outdated. It doesn't improve health, fitness. High intensity interval training does. You know, and the definition of aerobics is really this kind of lower heart rate, 120, 130 beats per minute for long periods of time. It doesn't strengthen the heart, and it's really not the best for weight loss either. And a lot of that is, again, you know, you're not getting any of those hormonal benefits when you're doing aerobic exercise. So the plan: weightlifting, efficient exercise once or twice a week. If you're just starting, once a week. Optimally, you would move to twice a week with these nice periods of repair in between. The fast and fit high intensity interval training, the day of rest. In the last lecture, we talked about mitochondria, which are these energy burning factories in your body. Essentially, they're the batteries that run our brain and our hearts and our metabolism and every piece of cellular machinery in our body. We want these things to be young, regenerated, rejuvenated. We talked about an eating plan to actually accomplish that last time, but these forms of exercise are really critical for mitochondrial regeneration and rejuvenation also. You will not maintain your weight over time without exercise. And I tell people, exercise is not the key to weight loss, but it's also critical for weight maintenance, and it's absolutely critical for health. You cannot be optimally healthy without moving your body. So it's a critical piece of putting the whole picture together. Action items: I always like people to get a body composition, to actually look at their lean body mass. We want to see this grow over time. There's a lot of great devices and machines out there that can actually get you that piece of information. When you know your lean body mass, it then tells you protein needs. We don't want to over or under consume protein. It'll tell you your fat over time. When I talked about being shapely and sexy too, even if the scale says you weigh the same, but you see your body changing, you're not going to know what those changes are unless you actually get a body composition. It's good to get a bone density done too. I mean, what is happening with your bone density, male or female, over time as you age? Getting your hormones measured. One of the things I always say is that nature is kind to us in some ways and not kind to us in others. It really supports our hormones until we get to the age where we're no longer reproductive, and then sometimes it says we're dispensable. And part of that are the hormonal changes that happen once we're no longer reproductive. So if we actually reproduce those hormones of youth, we get a lot of benefits there. And so getting your hormones measured means growth hormone, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, thyroid, potentially cortisol, or DHEA sulfate, which is kind of its balancing hormone. I mean, all of these things are available scientifically so that you know exactly where you are. You can actually implement a program and then measure and see the changes with those things. And that was just the same statement. If you're menopausal, or the male counterpart to menopause is now called andropause, right? And I would definitely, if you're having hormonal changes as a result of, where you are with age or before, it's really worth getting hormone levels measured. And going back, I mean, Lamar Plaza, they do an amazing job of working with what we call the bioidentical hormones. So when I do hormonal work with people's bodies, I'm measuring levels. I'm only putting back into the body exactly what was there in the first place, because those are these keys that fit in the lock that actually reproduce the cellular function. And I do it through compounding pharmacies, because one of the things that I teach is it's not your responsibility to fit the dose of a prescription of a bioidentical hormone. You want to get that bioidentical hormone to actually reproduce the hormonal balance in your body. And the way that you do that is by using good compounding pharmacies like Lamar Plaza that will actually get that just right for you. So keys to recovery. Sleep. And I spent some time last time on sleep, but the new science is saying that these maximum housekeeping recovery hours are from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. So, if you're going to bed at midnight and sleep until 7 or 8, you've missed 2 critical hours, because 10 to 2 is the way that we're biochemically programmed to actually heal, repair, hormonally rebalance, and do housekeeping pieces. Stress balance, again, we all have stress. It's really about the balance that happens there. But if we have excessive cortisol and we're not able to bring that stress hormone back down to baseline with some sort of stress balancing program, then we're going to be catabolic and actually breaking down as opposed to proper fueling. So food is your fuel. It is fueling your biochemistry and the machinery. You've got to feed what you've just stimulated so that it can actually do what it needs to do. And if you want to hear more about that, go to that lecture, Weight Loss Breakthroughs, in 2018. And I think I mentioned this, but ruthieharper.com, as well as these other companies' websites, they have all these lectures so that you can access them if you weren't able to come. Hydration. I was listening to somebody say today, the problem with hydration is, like, we all know that it's important, but sometimes the things that are so common that we think about every single day, it's like they're so common that we just forget about them, right? We just don't do it. But hydration is critically important for our bodies. And then getting the hormones checked and looked at. So those are all the things that I've talked about. This is my website if you want to go to that and get more information. Sleep, this is kind of what I've just gone through, but there's so much sleep science now, and literally it's been shown that people who sleep longer are leaner and have less, body fat around their waistline, which is where the major risk comes from. And people who sleep have lower levels of cholesterol and LDL, the bad form of cholesterol, and better HDL levels. So you're not just unconscious when you're sleeping. It's actually all this stuff is happening that's really critical for your healing and repair. I was just struck by this number, and I see this in my practice all the time, but there is 50 to 70 million people in America that have sleep disorders. A lot of these sleep medications are at the very top of the list in terms of being prescribed. One of the things that I use all the time in the over 40 population in my practice is melatonin, because it's one of the hormones that declines with age. And melatonin is not only directly related to the quality of your sleep, but also growth hormone production, which we've talked about. So sleep is just super, super important. It also directly relates to these other hormones of hunger and satiety, which I talked about in the last lecture. But again, when we want to have a healthy relationship with food and feel hungry when we should be hungry and satiated when we should be satiated, we've got to get all these hormones basically right and working in our body. Lots of cool sleep tracking devices now, because sleep has become cool and interesting. So if you want to kind of get really more scientific with that, you can use the sleep tracking devices. There's a lot of science now on light-dark stimulation. So getting a lot of light first thing in the morning, a midday dose of light can be incredibly important and actually help you with sleep. And then this whole, blue light stimulation that's happening with a lot of screen exposure at night or television. There's a lot of blue light screening devices that are actually out there that can be important. We've talked about melatonin when you're over 40 and how it's important for sleep and growth hormone production. We've talked about 10 to 2 actually being the magic hours. So action items here: good sleep hygiene. Maybe get a sleep monitoring device and see how you're actually doing there. Get a filter to actually get rid of the blue light in any sort of devices at night. Get some melatonin and make sure that you're getting that maximum stimulation there. I believe in what I call targeted supplementation, so not one of everything. I think food should be the basic fuel that comes into your body, makes your biochemistry work. No one's going to ever do better than food. But I do believe in targeted supplementation, and I believe that probably everybody benefits from a good multivitamin, antioxidant, essential fatty acid replacement, so these omega-3s, and we have just a very basic foundational product in our practice, and I like to do essential fatty acid testing and other testing that actually shows how are you doing with regards to basic multivitamin and antioxidant pathways in your body. There's a lot of cool Science out there now with these ketogenic aids. Last time we talked about ketosis and feast and famine eating. So basically when you're in ketosis, you are fat burning. Your brain is lit up and on fire because it's burning these ketones, which are the byproducts of fat burning, very efficiently. And so it used to be the only way that you got there was by burning fat in your body. Now you can actually take these exogenous ketones, so you can drink these things that will light up your brain and get you into this ketosis state. So these are fun to use, for instance, pre-exercise, for energy, for brain function, to help with appetite, to actually help you slip into the famine stage in ketosis. Carnitine, I call in the practice the fat forklift. So literally it's picking up your body fat again, shuttling it into these mitochondria for energy burning and energy production. And phosphatidylserine, this is kind of an interesting nutrient. If you actually are high stress, high cortisol, this is a nutrient that will bring down your cortisol levels. And so sometimes I'll use it in the high cortisol individual because I'm trying to shut off that cortisol as soon as that exercise session is over, so we're not catabolic as a result of it. And or sometimes I'll use this, for instance, in people in the evening if they're high stress, to shut down the cortisol production and allow them to get better sleep. So it's just kind of it's an interesting nutrient for people with excessive cortisol levels. Stress reduction. This is such a personal journey for people, but it's an incredibly important journey to feel and figure out what makes you calm, you know. And there's not, you know, I'm not like, you know, oh, everybody must meditate. If meditation's for you, that's great. If walking the dog makes you feel calm, then do that. Talking to a friend, reading a book, working out, whatever it is. But just remember, we live in an incredibly fast-paced, high-stress world, and it's the stress and calm that we're designed to actually have in our bodies. If we're calm all the time and flatline, we're dead, right? And if we're in a high cortisol state all the time, then basically we're anabolic, breaking down our body and not having the balance that we need. So action items, you can go in and do DHEA testing. DHEA is the counterbalancing hormone for cortisol. I usually will measure that so that I can look to see what is this person's average cortisol levels been over a 3-month period of time. Sometimes I actually am going in and getting what's called the 4-spot cortisol. So we're looking at it at 8 a.m., 12 noon, 4 p.m. and midnight. Sometimes it's fascinating because people are completely flipped, where you're supposed to have high cortisol in the morning to wake you up and low cortisol at night, so for you to go to sleep, and they're absolutely flipped, where they're flatline, exhausted in the morning, and then at night they can't get to sleep, and it's because they're the cortisol curves are out of balance. And then there's like all sorts of Zen tracking devices too. So these are kind of like the sleep machines, and there's all sorts of neat technology that you can use there. And just, one final note. I mean, I've talked about maximum stimulus, maximum recovery. This is all based on the fact that you're healthy, you're well, you're cleared for exercise. So obviously always check with your physician and make sure that if you're going to go out and get that maximum stimulus with an efficient exercise workout session or high intensity interval training, that you actually are safe and able to actually do that. And 2018, I'm always talking about, like, what can people do this year? Whatever it is, focus on your food, get your supplements right, sleep well, get your stress balance, get your bodies moving, all of the above, any of the above. But if you can do any of those things, you're really supporting and protecting your body in terms of health. And in the end, I always say too, there's only one thing that's going to be with you your entire life, absolutely, and it's the body that you live in. So you really want to get that piece right. Okay. So any questions or thoughts or anything?
What does the hormone testing look like? Is it blood tests or?
I like blood tests. They're, you'll hear about salivary tests. There's urine tests with hormones. There's blood tests. I've done all of them. I've actually done hormones, I can't believe this, for 19 years now in my practice. And I've had the ability to correlate each of those types of hormone testing with the clinical picture, and I still really believe that blood hormone testing is the most accurate. It'd be nice if you could do it through saliva or urine, because it's a little easier because you don't have to go to the lab and things, but I just don't think it's as on target as the blood testing.
And how much does that change across days? Like, is it historical? Like, can you see how hormones? If you're doing blood tests, is it like a snapshot for today, or someone's hormones are a certain level for several months?
So the answer is both. So women who are cycling, we have peak times of estrogen, progesterone. So in a cycling woman, I'll check an estrogen on day 12, a progesterone on day 21, because that's when they're peaking. And then I'll check testosterone any time of the month. In men, because you're not cycling, it's more consistent, but I do like you to go kind of in the same setting, same time of day. So in other words, like I will see a stimulation of, for instance, growth hormone or testosterone with a workout session, which is an interesting piece of data, right? Kind of pre and post exercise session. But if we're going to consistently look at like what's your baseline testosterone level or growth hormone level pre-exercise, then we want to kind of consistently do it at the same time of the day pre-exercise. If you want to see what's happening related to an exercise session, then we can do it pre and post. But men, because you don't cycle, you're smoother. And again, you just, we see these declines and changes in hormones. It happens in different men at different rates. And a lot of it is, again, just, how youthful your body is and how you're maintaining it. And, hopefully with the right types of exercise and all these other pieces, you have nice hormones of youth for a long period of time. That's really one of the goals of health.
Would Zumba be considered aerobic or?
Depends on how high you get your heart rate. So the high intensity interval training is that mechanism, I think, in a very short period of time to try to get anaerobic, because you're stimulating, resting. But if you're doing something like Zumba, or even more of a prolonged kind of higher heart rate. When I say higher heart rate, I mean maybe 130 or so. As long as you get to that peak heart rate for a couple minutes during an exercise session and you're literally breathless, so it could be playing tennis. Like you go out, you play tennis for an hour and a half with a friend or something. You can get anaerobic during that. I think a lot of the focus tonight is about how can you do this with maximum efficiency, because with tennis, conversely, you could go out and play tennis for an hour and a half and have fun, right? And get very little benefit in terms of the actual hormonal pieces. And if you know this, you could go out and play tennis and try to make sure that during that exercise session, you're actually getting to that anaerobic heart rate, right? It's going to look a little different because probably if you're playing tennis, your heart rate's going to kind of come up, right, as you're exercising, and maybe 30 or 40 minutes, into it, you're going to be at about like 120, 130, potentially if you're working pretty hard, right? And then you have to mentally tap into that. Okay, so now I want to have my anaerobic moment during this session. So you're going to really have to be hitting it on the court to actually get there. I do this at spin classes. And so it's not as efficient as I would want it to be because it's usually 45 minutes, but I like spin class, so I go. And so most of the time at spin class, you're still not in that anaerobic zone, but I just make sure that during my spin class, I get into that anaerobic 160, 170. And again, there's a lot of these cool tracking devices now, where you can look at, what was your average heart rate, what was your maximum heart rate, how many minutes were you there. There's all sorts of devices now where you can actually look at this. So, in response to your question, I think you can have fun and do what you love. If you love Zumba, go do Zumba, do what you love. But just try to incorporate these concepts into that, and then look at that as your kind of your high intensity piece. But the weightlifting piece you're not going to get with high intensity, and with high intensity you're not going to get the weightlifting piece. They really go together. What do you have to say, hi, our efficient exercise guys? Anything?
I think that you hit a lot of really good points to make, and offered a really nice segue to kind of what I hope to show everyone here, what we hope to show everyone. But yeah, I guess the overarching picture being that it doesn't need to be, exercise does not need to be as frequent as most people think, that a lot of what we're being taught is misinformation with the kind of 5-6 days a week for X amount of time. That time spent in the gym is somehow a measure of if you've actually gotten something done, which sometimes it can be. But yeah, the services that we offer here at Efficient Exercise. I'm Holden, by the way. I manage this location. This is Shane. This is Bert. They both manage the C-Home location, which is downtown, next to Trader Joe's and the power plant development. And yeah, our whole workout model is predicated on 30 minutes of high intensity training using some patented resistance training equipment that we have here that isn't found anywhere else, which is pretty cool. Very cutting edge, and the concept, it's a little abstract to understand, but once you get it, it enables us to get a whole lot of work done in a very, very short amount of time. So if there was anything that wasn't included in there, it was just specifics on the ARX, which I wouldn't expect you to explain. But Ruby does use it every Monday. I put her through quite a bit of it. And but yeah, fantastic. I think you covered all the things.
So Holden, for any of you that you want to experience what efficient exercise does in terms of the machine, so maximum intensity, maximum muscle utilization, through a full range of motion. The machines will actually show you that. I don't know, those of you who have tried efficient exercise or not. If not, this is a great opportunity to do that. And I know that they offer a complimentary session too. So I don't know, are any of you efficient exercise people? Okay, awesome. Well then all of you would really benefit from spending a little bit of time. Literally it's through that door. If you have time to do it. If you don't, I highly encourage you to get with one of these guys and just experience a session and see how much you can get in as short a period of time. But it's just interesting. I think that sometimes people are shooting themselves in the foot because they're over-exercising, and they're not allowing that recovery period that's so critical after the stimulus. And it's hard, conceptually when I tell people, do less, they're like, I can, it's like this, more is necessary, and that's really not the case. And it's especially not the case if you're tired or stressed or undernourished or hormonally imbalanced, so those are the things that you really want to think about. And then again, our hormones are key, as is food and sleep and everything else. And so, knowing where your hormones are and having those things in place so that once you create the stimulus, your body can heal, repair, do the things that it was designed to do in a youthful state are really, really critical. And, I think all of us, when we spend time, money, energy on anything, don't we want to get as much as we possibly can in return? That's kind of it's just part of life. And so those are the keys to really making that happen.
So I don't know if anyone has a few minutes and wants to just poke in. It's just one big room. It's not like it's not super huge.
But yeah, And thank you for coming. And yeah.